On this episode, my guest is author and journalist Craig Pittman, and we talk Florida in all its wacky glory. Plus, how do Americans really feel about Ukraine? We take a journey into the news of space, and you can't get a master's in Taylor Swift quite yet, but it's getting closer. On today's Open Highway.
The Open Highway with Eric Erickson.
And hello, everybody, and welcome to The Open Highway. I'm your host, Eric Erickson. Thank you for joining me today. As always, it is my pleasure to bring to you the things that I find interesting, and I hope that you will as well. It has been quite the week in the world. Things are really taking very interesting directions. We're going to talk about the news a little bit. First of all, my guest today is Craig Pittman. He is an author. He is a Florida native. He's written several books on the state and the subject of the wacky stories that come out of that state. You know I love talking about those. Florida. But he joins me today. We're going to talk about why they have these stories. Why is it that they just seem to keep coming? What is unique about that state? We even get into a little politics. It's a really great interview. That's coming up in a bit. But let's go straight to the news. So what is going on in the world today? Well, let's start with a poll that came out. We've reached the 6-month anniversary of the war in Ukraine. As this is being recorded, it's Ukrainian Independence Day, so everyone is very concerned about that. There's thoughts that there might be some sort of activity from Russia. The daughter of a very high-level advisor was killed in a car bombing outside of Moscow. And a lot of fingers are pointing at the Ukrainians. They say they didn't do it. They said that the person who did it escaped into Estonia. There's some comments now that this might trigger a NATO issue. It's just a whole house of cards. But there's a poll that just came out from Reuters that asked Americans whether or not they had continued support for the policy of backing Ukraine. And this poll came out, 53% of the people polled in the United States expressed support for backing Ukraine, quote, until all Russian forces are withdrawn from territory claimed by Ukraine, unquote. Now, only 18% of the people, now let's be honest here. Okay, so polls are scientific to a point, but 1,005 people were polled. So this isn't like millions. This isn't even tens of thousands. It's 1,005 people were polled. And 53% of them said we should stay in Ukraine until everything is back to normal. 18% said they opposed it. Now, the support came from both sides. Democratic voters were more likely to back it, with 66% of Democrats in support of it. 51% of Republicans were backing it. About 51% also supported providing arms, guns, anti-tank weapons, and such. About 22% opposed that. In previous polls, the numbers have been higher. More people supposedly were behind this. You got to wonder, rising gas prices, food prices, more of the issues, and it grinds on a little bit. So the numbers are falling as a support. It's not quite under 50%, and again, it's a polling group of a little over 1,000 people. But I'd love to see some more polls out there. I'm sure in the following weeks and months we probably will. If we're still at this at the year, it's really going to be they're going to be polling. But, it's they don't want U.S. troops. That's another part of it. Only 26% said they supported us actually putting boots on the ground. But 43% of people polled said that we should send troops to the NATO allies neighboring Ukraine. So we're starting to wonder, as we send more billions of dollars over there, whether, is a proxy war what's happening? Is it truthfully fighting for freedom? We have had guests on here who've said things on both sides. So the American people, they are starting to speak. They're starting to say, we are not sure this is a long haul kind of thing. We're almost at 50-50. So what else is going on? Oh, it's midterms. Midterms. So lately, we've been talking about Liz Cheney out in her race. She got walloped. We had another round of midterms this week in New York.
It does look like Jerry Nadler is speaking. We're trying to get the shot here stabilized and head on for you, as the Associated Press has called this race for the congressman. He beat Carolyn Maloney. Let's listen in. I know this is kind of...
Carolyn Maloney and I have spent much of our adult lives working together to better both New York and our nation. I speak for everyone in this room tonight when I thank her for her decades of service to our city. Now I stand before you tonight deeply humbled to be your Democratic nominee for New York's 12th Congressional District.
Third place candidate Patel with 19. So even together, they didn't pull the same as Jerry did. So he is going to go against Mike Zumpauskas. Never heard of him, but he's like a career candidate. I was looking through his information. He's a bridesmaid. He's run a number of times in a number of offices, and now he's going to run for this one against Jerry. It was a really ugly race. I wrote a Substack commenting on how there were some very pointed reporting toward Carolyn Maloney about her age. There was some comments inferring that she might be senile, some other things that came out. So this entire race, it got really ugly. And it all came from redistricting. And next week, my guest on the show is Matthew Deemer. Matthew is running for office in Ohio in the 7th Congressional District. He's a Democrat. He's running against Max Miller, who's a former Trump White House aide. They are squaring off after a redistricting. It's a really kind of a tough word to say. Redistricting. In Ohio. He's my guest next week. We are going to talk about all sorts of things. I actually just completed the interview. We're going to talk about the platform. We talk a little bit about what he's bringing to the race, what his opponent is bringing up. We talk about unity, how to bring the national conversation together. It's a really great interview. I'll be bringing that to you next Thursday, so stay tuned for that. But the elections move on. We get closer to November, and that's what, our lovely two-party system. Let's go to space. I love it. Space is, I love space. I love space stories. Anybody who listens, I'm a sci-fi fan. I'm a sci-fi author as well. So just space fascinates me. So there's been a couple space stories in the news lately. One of them is Artemis 1, if you haven't heard, is we are getting ready to go back to the moon. It's not going to happen right away, but Artemis 1 is ready to launch. They are preparing to go up hopefully next week. And this is part of our efforts to get back to the moon. Part of going to the moon is being able to then go to Mars. They want to set up the whole system on the moon that'll allow us to mine. We're not the only country doing it. China is going full speed toward their own ability to land on the moon. It's interesting. Years ago, this was back in the 90s, I interviewed Rick Ballard, who is the brother of Robert Ballard, who rediscovered the Titanic. And Rick was very heavily involved in space travel, engines, all of that stuff. And it was a long interview I did. And one of the things he brought up, and I never really thought of it until now, is if there was a reason that we needed to go back to the moon, and this was in the mid to late 90s, if there was a reason that we needed to go back to the moons, like some like Michael Bay end of the world reason that we have to send Bruce Willis up to the lunarscape in order to save us all, we couldn't do it at that point because the technology that we had used to go to the moon with the Apollo missions was unreadable. It's kind of like VHS tapes now. You know how a lot of us still have VHS tapes around. Maybe you have old family movies that are like tucked away in a cedar chest or something like that. But we don't have VHS players, and they're very expensive now if you actually go out and want to try and buy one, or you have to go to one of those services that takes care of your tapes. The computers that they used at the time were no longer functioning. So all of the data, he explained to me, all the data that you needed to make these calculations to get the rockets going and everything they needed to know was inaccessible because they had no way to read it. So they literally would have to start from scratch in order to do what they had done back in the 60s. So that's kind of what they're doing now. They have to reinvent the wheel in order to get us to the moon. And Artemis is part of that. So that's going to happen next week. And it's all part of this entire process of getting us back into space, which is part of getting us to the moon. Getting us to Mars, which I am so excited about. I love those little videos and those little pictures you see. People are like, "It's a door, it's a sculpture, it's that," and then the sun moves and it's just a rock. Although there was that one that came out where they found the piece of trash that was left over from the probe. And it's like, hey, we go to a pristine planet and we're already littering. So that's just the way we do it. You know, we are humans. More news. So one of the issues that a lot of people are concerned about are rogue asteroids. It's something you've probably heard of. Again, Michael Bay movies. But there's the worry that one of these will crash into the Earth, extinction level event. That's how the dinosaurs supposedly got wiped out. Or, you know, there's that famous one that hit in Siberia that knocked all the trees down. If you read comic books, it was actually a lot of comic books use it as a reason that people have superpowers. Just throwing that out there. Yeah, I'm a geek. What can I say? But one of these issues is that they want Space Force, they want NASA, they want these agencies to keep an eye out for this. So what NASA is doing is they're going to crash a spacecraft into an asteroid to divert its movement. So this is going to go down soon. It's going to be something that you can actually watch through this program. It's called DART. It's a double asteroid redirection test. That's very like Stargate, doesn't it sound? This is the DART. It's going to happen on September 26th. This is an asteroid that poses no threat to the planet. Hopefully they won't screw up and suddenly send it into another planet. Which you got to wonder, like, if you look at the universe as a larger scale thing, and if there is indeed life on other planets, and they redirect this thing, and then it goes skittering off into space, there's an entire possibility that we could, through like a butterfly kind of effect situation, where now this rock will skitter across the universe and could crash into some inhabited planet because of what we did. But hopefully it'll just not do that. And then hopefully they won't misjudge it and suddenly it does come hurtling toward the Earth. But this is part of the whole program, the Earth defense kind of thing. So fingers crossed, but coming up September 26th, you can watch through NASA this asteroid get diverted. So they're going to have a media day and some briefing. You can go to the websites and stuff, and I'll put the link in the show notes so you can check it out. But yeah, we are getting out into the universe, and we are stretching our collective muscle. Yay, humans! So you're looking for a new class to take? You're looking for a new educational direction? Well, maybe it's time to study the songwriting of Taylor Swift. So, back when I was in school, they had Beatles classes. You could study the Beatles. You could study, I believe there was a Rolling Stone. I know there was a Bob Dylan class, those types of things. So now, if you want, if you go to the University of Texas at Austin, you can now take a class in the Taylor Swift songbook. So these songs of Taylor Swift, and I'm a fan. I don't know if I'm a Swiftie, but I'm definitely a fan of her songs. I think it's amazing what she did to re-record them all, so she regained ownership of them after the whole selling of her catalog, which was pretty messed up. But now her songs will be read as alongside Chaucer and Shakespeare and Keats and other poets and writers, and really looked at for the lyrical poetry of her songs. So they're going to pull songs from her albums Red, her version, Lover, Folklore, and a few other albums. Not the first time. There's an NYU offered a class in Taylor Swift as a music entrepreneur and looking at how she approached things from a business person as well as a writer. But again, not the first time. I mean, if you're a fan, there's Texas State University offered a class in Harry Styles. so they offered a class where you could learn about his work in music and film. And here's why, quote, to understand the cultural and political development of the modern celebrity, which makes sense because this is a guy, Harry, like it's like a Justin Timberlake. It's this situation where they started with a group, they ventured out on their own, and then they really were able to craft this niche, and the similarities between the two are unmistakable. Now you've got Harry Styles. He's heading into film. He's been doing more and more dramatic work. He popped up in Eternals, and everybody's like, "Huh? Who's the character?" But yeah, so if music is where you want to go, you want to take a class, you can now go study Taylor Swift. It takes both communication and action for a marriage to flourish. If you're looking to work on your relationship, this book is for you. Inspire Your Marriage from John Thomas is more than just a relationship book. This book will improve your confidence, self-esteem, and mental health. You'll improve your marriage, intimacy, and relationship with your partner, but the biggest success will be you. Real solutions from real couples. Hear directly from couples as they reveal their stories as how they improve their relationship. Plus, the book includes the 2-week challenge, a tailor-made action plan of specific steps for what will work for you and your spouse. Available from Amazon, the link is in the show notes. Inspire Your Marriage from John Thomas. Check it out today. And because of my guest today, I would be remiss if I didn't do at least one Florida story because, Florida. So I think this one's interesting because this isn't just a story that hit the media. This is a story that came out of the Flagler County Sheriff's Office. And this is in Palm Coast, Florida. So normally the stories that we do about Florida Man, and for those of you who haven't been paying attention to the show, Florida Man comes from the idea that most of these news articles or the headlines start with, Florida Man does such and such. Florida Man drives to Space Force in order to warn of aliens and dragons. Florida Man has sex with a hamburger. It's like these kinds of things. It's always Florida Man. So the Flagler County Sheriff's Office, well, apparently they didn't wait for the media to do this. They put out a press release. They were so excited about the guy that they arrested that they actually put out a press release about this. So what went down was this 18-year-old named Jack Edward Fisher, and you know he's a criminal because they added his middle name. Jack Edward Fisher was arrested during an undercover buy bust operation set up by the county sheriff's office. Okay. So apparently he texted a commissioner, the Flagler County commissioner. His name is Joe Mullins. So this 18-year-old dude, he texts him, and apparently it was a wrong number, but he accidentally had reached one of the Flagler County commissioners, and he asked him if he wanted to buy an 8-ball of cocaine. So let's think about that a second. We all send, maybe someone sent a romantic picture to the wrong person, or you sent a text accidentally to somebody that you knew, but it was the wrong person, and that can be embarrassing enough. But this dude sent an offer to sell an 8-ball of cocaine to the wrong number, and it happened to be the commissioner of the county. Like, is that stupidity, or is that just, like, totally not paying attention? I don't know. So he sends this thing off, and again, this is a press release that they put out. They didn't even wait for it to hit the media. So the sheriff, Flagler County Sheriff Rick Staley, I need to get the sheriff on the show. He's quoted as saying, "I thank Commissioner Mullins for immediately reporting this poison peddler. His cooperation allowed our SIU detectives to arrange the buy bust and get this dangerous drug off the streets. This poison peddler," he likes that, he used it twice, "is now staying at the Green Roof Inn." I'm guessing the Green Roof Inn is their name for the jail. That, I'm pulling that. They didn't address it. I guess if there's a local out there, let me know. So they had screenshots of the conversation, and then they traced the phone number back, and they busted him. They eventually arranged an in-person meeting near a pond, apparently near the Bird of Paradise Drive. Sounds nice. He walked up, but he didn't get busted. Here's the thing. Fisher didn't get busted for the 8-ball. He got busted. He had a bag filled with over 3 grams of fentanyl, and as the press release explains it, enough to potentially kill 1,585 people. I don't know how they figured out that exact number, but there's a photo, and the links are in the show notes if you want to go check it out. He potentially, not 1,500, not almost 1,600, 1,585 people. So he was arrested on 2 charges, including felony possession of fentanyl, intention to distribute, unlawful use of a two-way communications device. So they busted him for a wrong number text. He's going to get charged with a wrong number. Have you ever heard of that? He's being held on $3,000 bail. Again, they mentioned the Green Roof Inn. Prior to this, he was busted for marijuana possession, and the greatest thing is he's got this mugshot with the biggest shit-eating grin that I think you've ever seen. It's either he's really, really high or he's just enjoying this. I don't know, but I tell you, go check it out. Links in the show notes. Yeah, he actually looks like he's having a fun time. Maybe the Green Roof Inn is a very enjoyable place. I'm guessing not, but I don't know. That's what he's got going. So, anyway, that's the news. Okay, my guest today is author Craig Pittman. Craig is a journalist, he's an author, he's a writer, and of course, the most important part, he is a native-born Floridian. He understands what's going on in that state, and I needed somebody to explain it to me. So that's why I invited him on the show. He wrote the book, Oh, Florida, How America's Weirdest State Influences the Rest of the Country, and Cattail, The Wild, Weird Battle to Save the Florida Panther. He is a 4-time Waldo Proffitt Award winner for his reporting on environmental issues. He's won a number of other awards for his magazine work. He's just a fun guy, and I'm excited to have him on the show. And without further ado, my guest, Craig Pittman. It just basically starts with the question that everybody always seems to ask. What the hell's up with Florida? Can we just start there? Because
Sure.
I've done stories on the show all the time, and we all know the famous tagline, "Man from Florida." So,
yes, Florida man, Florida woman, and of course, because Florida, that's a popular one too.
so why? Why?
Well, there are a number of reasons, many of which I spell out in my book, "Oh, Florida: How America's Weirdest State Influences the Rest of the Country."
Amazing how that worked out that you have a book about the subject, huh?
Yes, isn't it? Well, because I mean, it was easier than just having to answer this question all the time. Now I just hand them the book and say, "Here." Start off with the fact that we have undergone this wrenching demographic change in Florida. We were the least populated southern state in 1940, and now we are the third most populous state. We passed New York in 2014, so there's 22 million people living here.
Wow.
And 100 million tourists who come every year too. And we're not evenly spread over the whole state. We're kind of crammed into that 30-mile wide swath along the coast and along Interstate 4 where the theme parks are. So you pack that many people into that small a space in that short a length of time, and they're coming from all different backgrounds, different countries, different cultures, speaking different languages. They're bound to start ramming into each other's cars, chasing each other with machetes, arguing over whose dog pooped on whose lawn. It's just natural. And you think about where these folks came from. We've got retired CIA agents who fell in love with the state when they were here training for the Bay of Pigs, and they came back. We've got uniformed Scientologists all over Clearwater. We've got strip club moguls, spam kings, monkey breeders, and 29 electoral college votes. So,
it's just your average state. It's
just your average. Yeah. So, people are like, hey, I'm from Florida. I don't need Netflix to watch Stranger Things.
I've read a little bit on the subject, and definitely I ran into what you said about this demographic. You've got all these people. We don't think of Florida as having that many people. When I hear those stats, it takes me back. I'm like, wait a minute, hold on a second. Really? There's that many people there? But there are. And like you said, they're crammed into certain areas. It's not across the entire state. It's not spread evenly.
But we've been doing, and don't get me wrong, we've been doing crazy stuff, even before.
Oh no, you're frozen.
For all of that, we were doing crazy stuff back when we were a territory. One visitor who came here in the 1830s actually said he thought half the state were robbers and scalawags, and the other half were their penniless victims. So, not much has changed.
No, but there is another factor to it that I've discovered and it's fun to joke. Like I had Amy Seaweed was on the show, and she's a python hunter.
Yes,
so she's, and you guys just had that huge python hunt, and apparently some kids like ran over the biggest python, but the contest was already over, and it's such a Florida story. It's like, if it had been 12 hours ago. So I hear all these stories, and you want to make fun of them, and you want to joke about them, and we do. But as I dove into it, I found a very sobering fact is part of the reason that there are all these stories is because of mental health issues in Florida.
Yes, that's absolutely true. Yes.
We are second to the last.
We are routinely ranked 49th among the states in spending on mental health, to which I can only say, thank God for Texas.
I'm going to get hate mail. But it is a sad thing, because some of these stories that we laugh at is not stupidity. No. Some of it is because of mental health. They can't get
a lot of
help.
It's mental health issues or addiction issues.
Yeah.
And so I try and be very careful about which ones that I think are, worth presenting as amusing, which ones are not.
It's tough though. It's tough. Like a story I covered recently was the man who drove to Space Force and claimed that dragons and aliens were fighting.
Yeah, he had
Odds
serious
are
mental
he
issues.
probably has some
Look
issues.
for the phrase Baker Act. If the words Baker Act appear in the story, that means he's been basically taken to a mental health facility because he poses a threat to himself or to others. And
Ah,
if it's someone who's been Baker acted, I'm not going to make fun of that
yeah,
person at all. That's
it's
not right.
tough. But
Yeah.
the reason that it comes out is also because you have very special media laws. You have very special laws when it comes to the information being released to journalists,
Right.
right?
The government and sunshine law. But here's the thing is two things about that. One is other states passed their own sunshine laws after we did, but they're not
Mhm.
producing the same level of weird stories that we do. And then the other thing is that um, those laws don't create the news; they just make it accessible.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
so the easy sort of, to me, lazy thing is to say, oh well, Florida has all these weird stories because of the sunshine law. No, they just mean we can read the
Yeah.
police report. But
Yeah.
there are other aspects of life in Florida that are weird without showing up on the police report. I mean, I always like to point out we're the only state in America where the list of government jobs includes mermaid,
I
because
love
they're
that. I saw that
yes,
on your article.
yes.
That killed me. Please explain that.
Okay, so there's this place in Florida named Weeki Wachee Springs. So it was a classic Florida roadside attraction. This Navy frogman named Newt Perry bought the spring, cleaned it out, pulled out all the junk refrigerators and cars and stuff, and he built an underwater theater. And then he hired nubile local women to pull on 60-pound prosthetic tails and swim around and wave at the tourists. And it became this huge attraction. Elvis came there to visit and things like that. And but then Disney came along, and by the 2000s, business had sort of tailed off, if you know what I mean. And so rather than see this place bought by a water bottler or a developer and destroyed, the state stepped in and bought it and turned it into a state park. And the attraction is still part of the state park. So the mermaids are state employees, which has led to some interesting conversations about the use of tax dollars to pay for waterproof lipstick and shell bras.
Are you a native Floridian? It is
I am.
Floridian, right?
I am. And so if we're interrupted by a Fish and Wildlife Service agent who's coming in to tag me, that's why. Yes.
Oh, okay. They
I'm an
have to keep
endangered
track
species.
of all of you,
I'm an
right?
endangered species. That's correct.
Do Floridians, are they proud of the stories? Are they a little embarrassed by the stories? Do they take ownership out of it? I mean,
It's mixed. I'm very proud of it. I contend that instead of calling ourselves the Sunshine State, which is, by the way, a lie, we are not the sunniest state in the country. We're not even close. We should call ourselves the most interesting state, because I think we can back that one up.
oh yeah.
But I have friends who are like, every time a big story comes on the TV, they cringe because they just know there's going to be a Florida angle to it. If it's weird, there's going to be something Florida related in it. Remember the woman who got in trouble for trying to bring her emotional support peacock on board a plane up in New Jersey?
I do.
The peacock was from Florida.
Oh, the peacock was from Florida.
The peacock was from Florida. That's right. I say be proud of that fact. Be proud of the fact that we are not like other places. Move to one of those square states out west, move to Nebraska or something.
Yeah.
But if you want to live somewhere where every day you open the paper or you turn on the TV and you go, oh, wow, a guy punched a swan today, this is the place to be.
It's a crazy. I used to have in-laws who lived in Punta Gorda.
Yes.
Which just by its name is like, I'll let people run to the Google Translate
through the dictionary, yes,
through that.
Yeah.
But, this is a state where, like, one of the things I always loved is the way that the police would, like, take a car, they would grab a drug car, and it would be like this, like, souped up Corvette.
Oh, yeah.
And then they would just spray paint cops on the side. It would. Like, there's something very unique about the state.
Sure.
I don't know if that's always a good thing.
Well, not always, but okay. Let's take Punta Gorda, for instance. My favorite Punta Gorda story I think it was 1967. They're having what looked like a typical Florida rain shower, and then suddenly golf balls began falling on the town. Hundreds of golf balls fell on Punta Gorda, and the cops went out to collect them and started freaking out because there were just so many of them. And the best theory anybody came up with is that there had been a water spout that had somehow sucked up a golf course water hazard and then dumped it on the town. But they really have no no real explanation for how that happened or why. Yeah, exactly. That was my reaction.
Yeah, there's just it's like, yeah, it's like I do on the show. Yeah, Florida. So
Exactly. it's the most interesting state. It really
it is but it is by far. Like, I can't imagine, as wonderful as Wyoming is, I can't imagine driving through Wyoming and be like, this is the most interesting state. Look, golf balls falling from the sky.
Yes, exactly. Or an osprey is flying over with a fish and drops it in the, drops it in through the sunroof of your car, which happened to a friend of mine.
Do you think that we should? Okay, so here's your moment. Do you think that we should stop covering these stories and making
good Lord, no.
Good no. There we go. So
no.
Why is it important that we keep doing these stories with an eye to certain stories?
Yes, to being sensitive about it, but okay. So what's the role of the news? It's to reflect reality, to tell people what is going on in your world. If you try and censor that and say, no, nothing weird going on here, look over there. That's not doing your job as a news reporter. You have to tell people, yes, there are pythons battling the alligators for supremacy in the Everglades. They need to know this stuff.
When I told people that, I was teaching a class recently, and I brought up the story about the pythons, and there was actually one person in the class who was from Florida, and everyone, and I'm like, yeah, so pythons aren't native, and everyone in the class was like, what? And this one woman was like, oh yeah. And I was telling the story about, so this is a state where not only are people bringing in pythons as pets and they escape, which is a problem. This is a state where
escape, quote unquote,
like, I don't want to feed it anymore.
Yeah, it's 10 feet long. I don't want to clean up after
this. This is a state where there were illegal breeding operations, which on its own is enough of a story.
Yeah.
But then a hurricane comes in and wipes them out, and then sends all of these snakes into the wild.
That may not be an accurate story.
I'm poking around. Are you telling me my sources
I interviewed the guy who found the first python in the Everglades.
You did?
Yes, in 1979.
Okay.
He was on a first date.
Not with the python.
No. And I called him up, but I said, he's long retired. I said, listen, this happened a long time ago. You may not remember. He's like, oh, I remember this. I was on a date when I found that 11-foot 9-inch python, and he, it had been run over. It was on the Tamiami Trail, and he stopped the car, and his date's like, what are you doing? He said, I'm going to bring this back with me. I'm going to put this in the car and bring it back home. And she said, you're not putting that in the car with me. And he said, well, I'll come back for you then.
Because Florida.
He said there was no second date.
So that was back in the 70s,
1979, and it was 11 feet 9 inches. And I just recently learned this: the size of a python is not governed by its age; it's governed by how much it eats.
That I did learn.
That one had been eating quite a lot.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Now, where do you live in Florida? Are you in the normal part?
I live in St. Petersburg. I would not call it normal by any means. But I live in a very lovely, my house was built in the 1920s. I'm on a brick street. I'm right down the street from a waterfront park, a passive park that was great for my kids growing up to fly kites and, play catch and stuff like that. And, I enjoy taking walks around the neighborhood and for a while we had neighbors who kept 2 emus in their backyard, and the emus would get out at least once a month, and we would see the emu run down the brick street, and then we would see the neighbors run down the brick street after them. And one of my kids says, Dad, that was my favorite childhood memory, was watching the neighbors.
The emus.
Yeah, all I was missing was the Benny Hill music.
There has been a rash of like wild animals and pets, and I covered it a couple weeks ago. There was a rash of kangaroos that got loose all around the world. There's videos of the cops chasing them down. I'm like, the kangaroos are coming to get us, and a lot of them are in Florida.
Yes, they are. Yeah.
Because don't they have there's an exotic animal culture in Florida, isn't there?
There is. How can I describe this? Once, for a story, I was hanging out with the Fish and Wildlife Service inspection office at the Miami International Airport. And while I was there, a guy actually walked up to their intake window, He's wearing a like a do-rag, and it's a white guy, and he said, "Hey, I hate to bother you, but I just bought a tiger off a guy,
Oh my God.
and there weren't any papers with it, and I just wondered, is that a problem?" And the agent said, "Well, sir, first let's think about where tigers live. It's not Florida."
So what did they take the tiger?
They when I left, they were still negotiating.
They were
about
negotiating.
Yeah,
You negotiate with a tiger? I don't really think there's a lot of negotiation that goes on.
Well, exactly. And they were also dealing with, they had found a suitcase that had been left at the airport, and it had all sorts of exotic snake skins in it. And they were unpacking it, and when they got down to the bottom, they discovered the business card of the person who owned the luggage. It was a designer from Miami Beach, and he'd been bringing this stuff back illegally, and I guess he didn't want to be inspected, but leaving the business card inside of them was a bad move.
So is it because I mean, you hear about, I guess not as much anymore, but like we're still in the world of Tiger King, we still hear that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But I know laws have changed, but there was a time when it was very acceptable to drive down the highway and see a sign. It's like exotic animals. And
Sure.
Florida had a lot of that.
Oh yeah. Well,
time.
and bear in mind too, that kind of ties into, we were the winter home of the circus. And a lot of the circus people had their own exotic animals that they would put on display. There was a town still there, Gibsonton, which was known as the place where a lot of the sideshow folks would retire. In fact, they even made an X-Files episode that was set there, Humbug. It's one of the best episodes of the series.
Oh, I remember that one.
And people there, it would not be unusual to drive down the street and see, somebody training their elephant or their tigers and things like that, and it's part of life.
Because Florida.
Yeah, exactly.
So you had mentioned that you jokingly that you wrote the book because you didn't want to keep answering all the questions, so you wanted to have something to do. But what led you to writing the books that you write? And it's not just one; you've written several.
I've written 6 books, and that's my one that has done the best. In 2013, well, okay, let me back up. At the paper I used to work for, once a year we would do what we called the Sour Orange Awards, which were sort of like Esquire's Dubious Achievement Awards, where once a year, here are all the wacky, here's the best of the wacky stuff that happened in Florida this year. And with downsizing and so forth, we stopped doing that. So I started posting those things on Twitter as they came up, and I would always tag it as Florida, blah blah blah. And so in 2013, when the George Zimmerman trial was coming up, one of my Twitter followers, a woman named Laura Helmuth, contacted me. She was working for Slate, and she said, "How would you like to blog about Florida for a month?" And I said, "Are you sure a month is enough time?" And so I checked with my editors. They were fine with it. So for a month, I blogged about interesting stuff about the most interesting state. And towards the end, Laura said, "Hey, this is great. I really hope you're thinking of turning this into a book." And I said, "What a great idea." So I started working on a book proposal. And about then, I was contacted by an agent in New York who said, "Listen, we think 2016, being a presidential election year, would be a great year to have a book come out about Florida, because that, of course, every 4 years, the rest of America gives Florida the side eye and wonders how you're going to screw it up again."
Yeah.
And so we think you're the guy to write this book. So with his help, I put together the book proposal. We sent it to 16 publishers. 15 of them said, "Absolutely not. We have no interest in this whatsoever." 2 regional, nobody wants to read about Florida. And fortunately, St. Martin's Press said, "Yes, this is a great idea," and put the book out. It got rave reviews in the New York Times and the Washington Post and the Los Angeles Times, made the bestseller list for all of a week, which meant that they could slap that sticker on the paperback edition saying New York Times bestseller. Yep. And it continues selling. I'm still getting royalty checks off a book that came out 6 years ago.
That's what it's all about.
Yes, it is. And as a guy who's paying a mortgage and has kids in college, that is absolutely what it's all about. And it's been phenomenal. Two things happened when I was going around plugging the book, going around the state. One was people would come up to me and tell me their Florida stories, some of which I cannot repeat, but some I can. I think my favorite one was the couple who said they had discovered accidentally that their next door neighbors were running an illegal nudist bed and breakfast. And the way they found out was they gave their kids a trampoline for Christmas.
Oh no.
Yeah.
The
Mom,
visual
mom.
just
Yeah. But the other thing was then people were begging me for a sequel. Oh, please, please write a sequel. I'm like, this book just came out. No, you need a sequel. Look at all the funny stuff that's happened since then. And so I went, I was like, no, I've said all I want to say about that. And I went off and wrote a somewhat more serious book, one that I had been wanting to write for 20 years, about Florida Panthers and about the effort to save the Florida panther and how they had made what to me was the most remarkable comeback of any endangered species in U.S. history. There were like 20 of them, and now there's 200. So, it's not a lot, but it's way more than there used to be. But I'm still getting begged, we need a sequel. So I finally, this past year, in September, put out a collection of columns and stories called The State You're In, Florida Men, Florida Women, and Other Wildlife, which it's not a sequel. It's more like Son of O Florida. It celebrates that spirit of weirdness in Florida, and it sort of celebrates Florida storytellers too, because there are chapters in there about John D. McDonald and Elmore Leonard and Charles Willeford, the godfather of the wacky Florida crime novel, and the most popular author you've never heard of, Donald J. Sobel, who wrote all the Encyclopedia Brown books for kids, which, if you read them carefully, are set in Florida. They're set in an idealized Florida beach town. Yeah.
That's crazy. I always thought of them. Well, we won't say how long ago it was that I read them, but I always thought of him like in the Northeast. I don't know why.
No,
I guess I wasn't reading them very closely.
He was living in Miami while he was writing all these things, and living in Miami in the 80s, in the middle of the whole cocaine cowboy era. So I picture him sitting down in the morning, eating his grapefruit and reading the Miami Herald, reading about, drug dealers masquerading as cops, arrested by cops masquerading as drug dealers.
Those movies,
which is an actual headline.
Those movies and the TV series are. I was hooked. Just the story where like they got out of prison because they were using a card catalog because the computer hadn't yet been implemented into the jail system. So basically, they just forged an index card and then got out. I'm like, this is amazing.
Oh, they're great stories. They're great stories. My favorite one, and Dave Barry loves this one. He's talked about this one. Cocaine smugglers are being pursued by the Coast Guard, by a Coast Guard airplane. They're both in airplanes. So the smugglers decide to lighten their load. So they toss a bale of cocaine out of the plane, and it tumbles end over end and lands in the middle of a crime watch meeting in Homestead, and just misses hitting the police chief in the head.
Because Florida.
And so I picture Donald J. Sobel reading all this in his morning paper and then putting all the dishes away and going off to write another story about Encyclopedia Brown solving a bank robbery because he knows something about Civil War trivia.
Do you still write for the paper, or do you?
No, I was laid off in March of 2020, right at the very start of the pandemic. But I mean, it's great because I immediately, like a month later, I'm doing a weekly column for the Florida Phoenix on environmental issues, which is lots of fun.
Yeah.
I can use all the puns and pop culture references I want to. I'm freelancing for various magazines. I've done stories for National Geographic and Smithsonian, and I'm sorry, not Smithsonian, Scientific American, Flamingo, which is a Florida magazine. I've written quite a few stories for them. And I'm working on my next book. And I'm doing a weekly podcast called Welcome to Florida. Our conceit is that my co-host Chad Scott and I, we talked about this, and we decided that our target audience is the 900 new people who move here every day, and nobody tells them what they've gotten into. So we're trying to educate them.
So you can still get your money back on your condo,
exactly,
in case you want to move back.
Yeah, so we've done some fun ones. We did one on the history of the Cuban sandwich, which, by the way, is the easiest way to start a war in Florida, is talking about the Cuban sandwich and where it came from. Oh my God. We've done one on we've done stories where we interviewed python hunters, gator wrangler, nudists, because Florida has more nudist resorts than any other state because of our very mild weather, of course, and shark expert, a cockroach expert, because part of the Florida experience, of course, is dealing with that first flying cockroach coming straight into your face. Yeah, exactly. No horror movie will scare you after that.
That's that's back to you in Texas, because Texas is the other place. Like, you have to put the coaster on your drink when you're at the bar because the cockroaches will fall into your drink. So you and Texas once again are fighting back and forth.
That's right.
Let me ask you. get a little insight here, because on the show, a lot of the show is politics as well. It's a personal interest of mine, and you are right in the middle of a very interesting situation with your governor.
Really? I hadn't noticed.
Yeah, you know, what kind of newsman are you?
You mean the guy who actually put his balls up for sale as part of his campaign?
There we go. Yes, it was amazing how he was suddenly took a knee. He basically recently just said, "I defer to the powers that be."
No, they are literally selling golf balls in a package labeled "Our governor has a pair."
I'm gonna go find I need to find a link to those.
And I just don't think they thought this through about what's going to happen to those balls next. You know,
he turned very quickly. Like, he suddenly went from this front runner, this person who might challenge for the Republican ticket, to no, I'm good. I'm good with the state.
He hasn't given up. He hasn't given up.
Do you think he's going to run? Do you think he's going to?
I think everything he does is aimed at that, and unfortunately, none of that involves actually dealing with the real crises going on in Florida. It's all made up crises. Like he recently attacked a drag show. Is that really a threat to Florida? Drag queens, is that really what's going to bring us down? Yeah. I don't think so. I think it's our property insurance crisis, our affordable housing crisis, our water pollution crisis that's killed 1,000 manatees. You know, those are the real problems in Florida. But no, we have to go shut down this drag show. So
those are the real things that are going on there.
Yeah. Those are the real problems. But you know, his big war on wokeness is all he cares about. And because that's what gets him on Fox News. So I suggest in a recent column that he should give up running for re-election as governor and give up running for president and just concentrate on getting a job with Fox News, because that's clearly where he wants to be.
We have a similar kind of, we're on the other end of the political spectrum. We kind of have the similar issue here in California, because we have Newsom, who everybody knows is got his eye on the Oval Office.
He wants to run, yeah.
And so he's putting out, it's odd living here because suddenly we're getting these interesting social programs and we're getting a lot of things that are being spread around, but you can tell it's him going, look, I can operate a big political machine just like I do here in California. And it's great for us because now school kids have lunches and other things that apparently were never important until this election came up. But you know, I wrote a Substack about it that came out this morning about he could be the new Ted Kennedy. He could be the new guy running against Biden, that way. The new spoiler, you know. So
he actually took out ads here in Florida criticizing DeSantis in Florida.
Yeah,
and that's hey, look at me as a contrast. So
Texas too. He did it. Yeah, he was ripping on Abbott. So
dude, you're not fooling anybody.
Yeah, it's, you know, I think we're all just waiting for the midterms, and then we'll just be like, okay, you know. Although I covered a story earlier today about a time traveler who supposedly told it was either TikTok or Facebook, because that's where we all go for our important news.
Sure.
And then it was picked up by the Mirror because, you know, Britain. But that Biden will be dropping out in December due to health issues. And I'm like, you know, I don't think that's so much of a prediction as like pretty even money.
Yeah.
And at this point, it's kind of a bet. So what's next? What's the next project? Are you going to do more books on, Florida or?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. That's, you know,
it's a never ending source of material.
Really. I will never, ever run out of Florida stories to tell. And the proposal I'm working on now is for a book on pythons, how they got here.
You are joking. Are you really?
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm bringing up the fact that at least in the Marvel comics, the Everglades is supposed to be an entrance to another dimension. So maybe that's where the pythons came from.
You're going to get a cease and desist from Disney. They're going to be like, nope, don't ruin our stuff. But it's the python thing. I just coming back to that. It's fascinating to me.
Yeah. Oh,
and then like, I don't know, like Amy, she was telling me about like how they have to humanely put them down, and people are like, well, you have to send them back to Asia. What, like in like coach class? Like, what do you?
Well, and they're actually, it's interesting. They're actually endangered in Asia because of the loss of habitat. So you couldn't send them back there. They got no place to live.
Well, but there's a parasite issue.
They're thriving here, but you know, you got to kill them. Yeah, they carry a parasite that is actually affecting and killing native snakes here in Florida.
Yeah.
So, and they, you know, everybody thinks they've got the silver bullet that's gonna get rid of them, but nobody's done it yet.
my question for Amy, I don't know if you listened to the interview, but my question for Amy was like, when you cut them open, do you find like, she's like, oh, they eat all these mammals. I'm like,
Yes, they do.
have you found dog tags? Like, have you found like
No,
it's
no.
like the scene from Jaws where they open up the shark and the license plate falls out. It's like, what have you found? She's like, well, I found partially. I'm like, no, dog tags, like scruffy.
Yeah,
I want to
it
know if there's
hasn't.
a little dog tag that's scruffy.
No, no, they haven't reached that point yet. But those are gators that'll take care of your little yip dog. But no, with the pythons, they have found like they found a complete set of bobcat claws in one of them. They found an entire deer. One of my favorite python photos is three scientists from the U.S. Geological Survey, and they're standing in the Everglades and they're holding up the snake with a huge lump in the middle. And when they cut the lump part open, it was like a 9-foot alligator that it had swallowed.
This is
before they caught
crazy.
the python. Yeah. Well, and my thesis is, it has changed the image of Florida from vacation land to snake land. That we are snake land now.
I don't think of Florida like I don't personally think of Florida as a vacation place anymore. I mean, it used to be, is Epcot still around? Like Disney
Yes.
World, it's that,
Mhm.
and a couple of those.
You can still get stuck in the It's a Small World ride. Yes.
I also have a theory, and this is a personal theory, and I've taken a lot of blowback on this, but I personally don't believe that Florida or Arizona should have baseball teams.
Oh, well, we're going to
That's just because you have all the minor league teams.
Because the Rays field, their dome stadium is like 10 minutes from my house. So I
just
love
don't
it.
think because
you,
you got spring training. You shouldn't like it's nice weather. Who wants to go sit in a ballpark?
I love spring training, and unfortunately, when the Rays came here, our spring training team moved, so we no longer have spring training at St. Petersburg, which had it all the way dating back to when it first started in the 20s.
Yeah, but you have emus.
Unfortunately, they traded them in on what are those Belgian rabbits that look like dust mops? Those do not run away nearly as fast. So.
I think they actually are dust mops. I think that's how we get about it. So what's the immigration like? How many people do you know? How many people move into the state? Are people staying there? Is it still numbers going up? Are people moving out of the state?
People are still moving in. There are people moving out. Yeah. And, so far the number moving in exceeds the number moving out. But the way that our state's economy is set up, they call us the Ponzi state. We've got to keep having new people moving in or the whole economy collapses. So we go through the cycle of boom and bust that's been going on since like 1915.
Yeah.
And so the market gets incredibly hot and people make lots of money, and then suddenly it all crashes and everybody's poor again. And then it all starts all over. So I keep watching the papers, watching the, real estate reports. They're saying, oh, it's cooling off now. Maybe a good time to get out of the market. So
what was the latest? What was the latest boom? Because like we all know in the 80s, the boom was, if you watch Cocaine Cowboys, it was
we're the real estate market has been booming, and a lot of it is these folks who are like, oh, I hate the COVID restrictions in my state. I'm going to move to Florida where it's free and I can get sick if I want. So,
but that's over. Like now it's evening out.
The market is cooling off, and it's supposed to be a lot of tech bros moving down to Miami from New York and then getting here and going, hey, it's hot. How'd that happen?
Yeah. Well, everybody's moving to Texas too. It's it's you in Texas. What is it with Florida and Texas?
Yeah.
You're like these weird like Siamese twins that were separated at birth. There's some.
Yeah, exactly.
Appreciate you joining me.
Sure.
Could you just let me know, and everybody listening, like where can they check out your books? What's the best place to read about the Panthers and the Florida,
I recommend
everything.
Cattail, O Florida, and so forth are all available from your fine independent bookseller near you. Look them up on IndieBound. I particularly recommend the one that's near me, Tombolo Books, if you want an autographed copy, because Tombolo does a great job of, they'll call me up, hey, somebody wants an autographed copy, I'll run down there and sign it.
Oh, that's great. So, and all the links are in the show notes, so everybody can go to the show notes and click them and go through. Craig, thank you so much for helping me wrap my mind around the Florida issue. And I feel I need to go lay down. I need to go lay down and process this. It's
okay. All right.
Check.
If, before you use the bathroom, check under the seat for iguanas. That's a problem here.
Oh my God. Maybe I need to stay in California. I don't know. All right.
Thank you.
Support comes from the History's Train Wrecks podcast that focuses on stories like a temper tantrum that changed history, the president who promised not to run again and regretted it for the rest of his life, the World War II general who lost his pants on a secret mission in enemy territory. The History's Train Wrecks podcast, available now.
Hey everybody, I hope you enjoyed the show. It was a pleasure bringing it to you as always. If you want to help out, click the like, click the subscribe, click the share button. Just click a button and help us spread the word. And head on over to Substack, where I write a column on politics, current events, and pretty much anything that catches my eye. Thanks for the support over there. We've been growing, and it's all because of you. So, catch you on the next episode, and stay safe out there on the open highway.
For the highways of America, which for so many years were an assortment of as many designs and pavements as there were states, are now becoming one big road that can take you anywhere faster, safer, and more directly than ever before. What is this big road? Where is it going? How much has been built? How much is yet to come? These are questions we ask. Certainly traveling the entire system would be a memorable experience, but few of us have the time for such a trip.